Hi, everyone. Welcome to Interchange. I'm Dan Jones. Thank you so very much for joining us. Lots of things to talk about today. The horrible shooting at the grade school in Connecticut, the Michigan law, which guts a lot of the power that unions have, the Milwaukee police officer who has now been fired for beating on the handcuffed woman in the back of his squad car, and proposals that do away with requiring City of Milwaukee employees and teachers to live within city limits. All right, let me introduce everybody. Longtime newspaper columnist Joel McNally. Kevin Fischer, former broadcast journalist, political analyst, and oftentimes a fill-in host over on WISN Talk Radio. Denise Callaway, community affairs and public relations professional. And Gerard Randall, education consultant and local job creation expert. Rick Horowitz will be along with commentary at the end of the show. Let's talk first about the Connecticut shooting. 28 people dead, including 20 kids, they say right now. The 20-something gunman, he is dead as well. Can you blame anyone or anything besides the gunman? Do you blame guns? Do you blame the mental health system? Or, Kevin, is this just simply an unpreventable type of tragedy?
Wow. I'm not sure that I have any answers to any of those questions because it just happened this morning and we still don't know. I think there is a pattern in some of these massacres, these slaughters as of late, though, where you have someone who's very troubled about some issue or something going on in their lives, and they decide before they take themselves out that they are going to inflict harm upon all kinds of innocent people. And at the risk of being blunt, I'm not advocating suicide by any means, but if you're plotting to take your own life, then do so. Don't go into a school and start shooting, up innocent children and other adults. I think there will be a knee-jerk reaction to not blame the evil perpetrator, but to blame the gun. And at this point, I would like to say that I don't think we should jump, as some have already this morning in the national media, to try to politicize this and try to make points for a political agenda. I think that's the wrong thing to do. Let's sort this out and get all the facts before we jump to any conclusions.
Denise, somebody said to me today, it's always a guy, it's always a gun.
Well, it's always a gun because guns in this country are so easy for people to access. And that's not knee-jerk, that's factual. We do not have a need in this country to have semi-automatic weapons to exercise our Second Amendment rights, period. We don't need it. It's not something, I heard one of the weapons that was used in this horrific massacre of innocent children today as a military type weapon. We don't need that in this country for citizens to be able to access these kinds of weapons. I do not understand how we as a country have decided that it's going to be okay for people to access these kind of weapons, and that we're surprised when people use them to harm and kill other people. What did we think people were going to do with this? If this is not a wake-up call for this country to say, Second Amendment, absolutely, no problem with that. These kinds of weapons are not necessary for us to exercise our Second Amendment's rights. And if we don't do something about this, the blood of those children is on all of our hands.
If those guns were banned, would there be fewer of these type shootings?
I think people who are mentally unstable will find a way to do whatever harm they're intending to cause by whatever means they can most readily acquire those means to do that harm by. I just feel so badly for those families. I imagine having to be in that situation myself where, my own grandson in school, just, these innocent kids and adults who are just going about their regular day in a community where they could never imagine this kind of thing happening to them. They felt safe that morning, and their whole world just became turned upside down in terms of what their thoughts were about safety, what their thoughts were about how they can go about protecting themselves. And it's always that unknown, that additional bit of uncertainty that just wrecks lives.
Whether it's a college campus, a movie theater, an elementary school, is there any way you can stop this kind of stuff?
Yeah, get rid of guns that kill people in massive numbers, in large numbers, exactly what Denise said. Assault weapons were banned in this country for a decade, 10 years. Bill Clinton banned them, and it was George Bush who decided to not renew that ban after 10 years. And the idea that a mentally ill person, and this of course was a mentally ill person, will find some way to kill 28 people, no. It takes an assault weapon, a weapon of war, to kill 28 people. And no one in this country, for self-defense or for any other reason, needs a weapon that kills 28 people. They really don't. That's not, President Obama there was this embarrassing moment in one of the presidential debates with Mitt Romney where a woman stood up and asked both of the candidates, what the hell are you going to do about these mass shootings? And basically, both of them weaseled, but at one point, Barack Obama said weapons of war have no right to be on our streets. And we have to look at that. We have to re-examine that again. And that is absolutely. I'm ashamed for the political system that both parties have not taken us on. When Kevin says, no, we can't talk about it right now, talk about changing our laws right now because this just happened. Well, about a week ago, another mass shooting happened out in Portland. A few weeks before that, there was a shooting here in Milwaukee at the Sikh temple with people worshiping and attending their church service.
The spa in Brookfield.
And weeks before that, the spa. Apparently there's going to be no time politically we can talk about taking these weapons out of people's hands that are the only purpose is to kill large numbers of people. It's not anything to do with the Second Amendment or anything to do with self-defense. It is to murder large numbers of people, and we apparently like it. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me.
All right.
Children, bodies of children.
Now let's talk about the Michigan right-to-work laws, which passed so quickly this past week. People will no longer have to pay dues to a union if they don't want to. This goes one big step further than Wisconsin, which means some people are now wondering if it will be proposed here as well. Even though Governor Walker says he's not going to push for it, that doesn't mean some legislators couldn't push for it.
Well, you will have some legislators that will attempt to bring it up in this next legislative session, but I don't think it's going to go very far. First off, they have...
I think they'll be taken to the woodshed if they do.
I agree with you. It's not one of the priorities of this legislature. I think they've just gone through a fairly protracted battle around Act 10, and so I really don't see a Republican-controlled legislature bringing it up. I frankly don't think that there's a need to bring it up in this state, given people are still anticipating how Act 10 will play out once it's fully implemented.
Weren't you surprised? UAW headquarters, Detroit. How did this ever get through?
Anyone has to be surprised at that. Michigan is the bastion of the unions, but what the folks over there are saying. It's just a few weeks ago, the governor of Michigan said, that wasn't on his agenda. Just like Scott Walker says, it's not on his. Wouldn't it be nice if we could believe, our Republican governors in this country? Wouldn't it be nice if we could think they were telling the truth? This is an agenda across the United States. A lot of it comes out of ALEC, who's feeding all these bills to all the Republican legislatures. But clearly, and we saw in a movie, Scott Walker say, the first step is to, take union rights away from public employees, and it's divide and conquer, and then we can move on to the private employees. People keep saying, people who talk about language say, people on the left shouldn't use the language of Republicans. I mean, if you say right to work, that sounds like you're giving someone rights and you're trying to give people freedom when in fact you're taking away rights, a right to bargain on your wages and working conditions. Someone suggests we call these laws corporate servitude laws because that's what it is. The corporations get to do whatever they want to us and we have no voice in it. And that's what in this past election the people in this country voted against. They voted against giving everything to the top 2%.
Is it fair to say all the lawmakers in Michigan and the governor who signed it didn't know what they were doing?
Oh, I
knew
think
exactly what they were doing.
and that's why there was, I think good legislation is legislation that, like a good bottle of wine, has a little time. You open it up, it's got a little time to breathe. Don't have to rush to drink it. The reason that they rushed this legislation through because they knew exactly what they did. They didn't want to see happen in Michigan what happened in Wisconsin. And they said, you know what, we want this done, I think, for precisely the reasons that Joel said. It's not about someone's right to work in a state. It's all about efforts to make unions less important and less able to not influence but participate in the political process the way that they traditionally have. It's all about, I think, I don't mean to sound paranoid, but I do think it's about an agenda to really find ways in which the voice of the common person is much, much more difficult to be heard in politics.
But some people might argue that the agenda in Detroit must be to get people back to work.
Absolutely, and
people are back to work in Detroit in record numbers.
Detroit is what? It's bankrupt. It's in horrible shape. And
so let's take rights away from workers.
Well, you don't take rights away. You're just saying that if you don't want to join a union, you shouldn't be forced to do so.
Oh, really?
Now, are wages less in right-to-work states?
Yes.
They are, by about 10%. But on the flip side, unemployment in right-to-work states is 10% less. I look at this from a historical perspective. Yes, this was devastating.
Didn't make any sense.
This is devastating for the unions, absolutely. But it was inevitable because of globalization. After World War II,
this has nothing to do with globalization.
It absolutely does, if you let me explain. After World War II, the unions, and especially the automakers, were sitting on top of the world because Britain, France, Japan, they were all in economic shambles, and American union workers were able to have wages and work conditions and benefits that were the envy of the world. Well, guess what happened? The rest of the world recovered. And we don't have the situation now where our unions and American workers are at the top of the world. And I think that this is inevitable that this is going to happen. Not here in Wisconsin. I think the governor is absolutely being honest when he says he's not pursuing this and he doesn't want anybody else to pursue this.
And he's the leader of the party.
Right, but you could see this happen in other Rust Belt states that are struggling with states in the South. You could see it in other states where unions make up a big percentage of the state's workers, like Hawaii, Alaska, New York, Washington.
This
isn't the end.
What this does is it takes away the right of both labor and companies to be able to negotiate. That's how, when we talk about the power that unions have, that power came through negotiation, and it was power that was in many cases willfully given by employers. What this does is takes away that right of both employees and employers to negotiate a fair wage. And for all of us who are going to be off and only work 40 hours a week and get paid overtime, those are the kinds of things that unions will
those glory days are over.
Those deep South states that have the right to work laws, despite what you just said, are the poorest states in this country, and they're the ones who actually use the greatest number of government benefits.
Well,
and now we want to do that all over this country. This devastates the economy of the North, just like the economy of the South.
Their auto plants are in far better shape than Detroit right now.
All right, next topic. The Milwaukee Fire and Police Commission has reversed itself and voted to fire the officer caught on tape punching a handcuffed woman in the back of his squad car. Was justice served, or was justice given to the side that screamed the loudest?
Justice was served in my book. I think anyone who watched those videos really had to ponder how the commission drew the conclusion that it did that allowed for the reinstatement of the officer to begin with. And I applaud them for actually going back and taking a look at that decision another time. That may have been the more courageous thing to do, because you're going to have a public that will be screaming on the other side. I think there was just as much pressure that was brought to bear on them by the police and fire unions worried about what happens going forward with other decisions that are adverse to their membership that are made and then reversed. So I thought it was a courageous decision that they made. I think it was the right decision that they made. I also think the public is going to put more pressure on the state legislature to maybe open up for more opportunities for the average citizen to weigh in, either through public testimony when certain candidates are nominated, or a more formalized process for the public to weigh in whenever the mayor nominates someone for the commission.
Is it any different than a judge in a criminal court matter saying a week later, okay, I found you not guilty, now I'm going to change my mind and find you guilty?
I think it's very different. I mean, I didn't hear anybody screaming on the other side, this person should stay on the force. Anyone who sees that video, I haven't heard people in this community say we should have police officers who punch women who are handcuffed. I think it was the wrong decision originally, and they've never totally explained why they made that decision. They just kind of said, well, let's make another decision. But these aren't judges; they're citizens. They tried to explain why they did what they did, but it wasn't terribly convincing. I think on the face of it, and as I said last week, the chief has a right to run his department, has a right to discipline and fire, and the only reason you should overrule the chief as an outside body is if he's done something that a whole large group of the community would say is wrong.
Should we let the chief make his own decisions and run his own department?
I think the chief is held accountable for those decisions that he makes, and I think that is what we need to let happen. The Fire and Police Commission is seen as an opportunity for cases to be reviewed. So if for some reason there was an abuse of power on the part of the chief, if there was a misstatement of facts in a case, that's what the Fire and Police Commission is designed to do, to really take a look at those situations and see, was this a case where the chief stepped out of bounds? Nobody's questioning whether or not this man, I think, brutally punched this defenseless woman several times and then pulled her by her hair out of the squad car. I agree with Joel. I have yet to hear anybody say this is somebody who deserved to be on the force. I think the good thing about this is that it really has worked to shine a light on the work that the Fire and Police Commission does, and perhaps the challenges it has of a citizen body that sometimes includes citizens who don't have any experience with law enforcement. But I got to tell you, I don't think this was law enforcement. I think this was pretty much common sense. Are
these decisions too important to be left in the hands of citizens?
Well, I see the value and importance of this citizen review board, where the public can come forward if it feels that there's been, a police brutality, that they have a body to go to. But Denise echoed what I said last week, and maybe some good will come out of this, and that the Fire and Police Commission will be revamped. If you're a school board, you should have some sort of expertise in education issues. If you're a Fire and Police Commission, you should have some expertise in law enforcement. I'm not so sure courageous is the right word to use to describe their flip-flop. I think they did succumb to the pressure. They made the right decision for the wrong reason.
They could have dug their heels in and just said,
but I don't think the citizens on the Fire and Police Commission should be only those associated with law enforcement. That's why I'm against, electing this, because, the police union could, put up all their candidates and get them elected. So, I think having ordinary citizens with, as Denise says, common sense, to look at these,
and they don't have to be elected. The mayor can appoint.
Loses his job or is disciplined in his job does have a right to appeal to fairness.
I think some of us, at least 4 of us on this panel, have covered police brutality cases over the years in this city, and I think this particular officer, okay, it's not over yet, But given what has happened in the past concerning some Milwaukee police officers, I think he's very fortunate that he hasn't been charged yet with a crime.
Right.
All right, next topic. It comes up for discussion every single year, but now that Republicans control Madison, folks wonder if the legislature will do away with the laws that require city workers, including police officers, firefighters, teachers, to live in the city of Milwaukee if they want to pick up a paycheck from the city of Milwaukee. If this goes through, it would seem to be this is going to be the time.
Probably, and as I've said before on this show, I actually break with a lot of progressives on this because I don't think the people you work for have a right to tell you how to live or where to live. I think that's your private right and private life. I understand why cities want to require it. You know, it's been said, you know, I don't like the idea of police officers, for instance, you know, moving to the suburbs and not being part of the community that they work in. At the same time, I don't like the idea of just because you have a job with somebody, they can tell you where to live, who to marry. You know, some of these people, you know, get married to someone who lives, you know, in another community and they have to move to this community. You know, it's to me, that's just too much control to put in the hands of the people you work for, and that comes from me as a union organizer, and which relates to the other thing we talked about.
Would it make the pool of potential employees much larger?
Yes, I mean, it would definitely make the pool of employees larger. That's one of the things that MPS is taking a look at. Is MPS says we're going to have 700 teacher vacancies. We've got to look, you know, because we don't want just 700 people. We want a pool that gets us to that 700. So the district has to take a look at ways in which it can broaden that pool. And in the case of the district, it's talking about relaxing the period of time in which someone has before they need to move into the city and have to move into the city of Milwaukee. But yes, I mean, definitely you see a broadening of the pool. And I think it's a particular issue for MPS now, but I think as we take a look at an aging workforce, more people retiring, how do we make sure that we have the best people possible? Now, I live in the city. I am required to live in the city, but I lived in the city before I was required to do so. So I think that not everyone is in that situation when they may find a place of employment when they want to work, and an employer finds the skill set that they need.
I can't count the number of times in this show where we've said, I don't know who would want to be a Milwaukee cop anymore. If you say you don't have to live in the city, you can live wherever you want, does that make a much larger number of people who might want to be Milwaukee cops?
I know Milwaukee police officers who, yes, would move in a heartbeat out of the city of Milwaukee.
Many of them live right on the edge of the city right now.
Yes, they do. That's a well-known fact. But they would remain Milwaukee police officers. I think it would make the job more attractive. And I've heard the mayor say that if the residency goes through, which it almost did in the last session, that Milwaukee becomes Detroit. Well, if you're that fearful that people have that kind of view of your city, then it behooves you and other city powers to make the city more attractive to want to live and work in.
All right. With a few more thoughts now on today's...
You had thoughts on that?
I had thoughts.
Too late.
With a few more thoughts now on today's shooting and other shootings, past and future, here's Rick Horowitz. Rick?
Here's what we got to do. We got to throw the book at them. Tough penalties. That's the way to handle it. That's the only way to handle it. I mean, you don't want to restrict anybody's guns. This is America. The more guns we have out there, the safer we are. What you want to do is make them pay for their crimes. Tough penalties and long prison terms, but only after they use their guns. Like I say, you take those mass murderers and you throw the book at them. Anyone who comes into a school or a temple or a movie theater or an office or a day spa or another school or another office or a shopping mall or another office or another school, anybody comes in there with a gun and shoots the place up, kills a bunch of people, little kids or even regular grown-ups, especially little kids, you got to make them pay. You just got to take those mass murderers, or at least those mass murderer corpses, because, you know, a lot of those mass murderers, either the cops shoot them right there in the middle of the shooting, or they shoot themselves in the head before the cops can get them. So you don't always take these guys alive. Anyway, you take those mass murderer corpses and you crack down on them. That'll stop them for good, and it'll stop the next guy too, right? Because when some future suicidal mass murderer sees the corpse of some other suicidal mass murderer get sent away for years, that's going to make the second guy think twice, right? Lets him know he's never going to get away with it, which is exactly what your suicidal mass murderer needs to hear. I mean, you won't stop all of them. You'll never stop all of them. But what are you going to do? Stop them before they shoot the place up? Stop them before they kill a bunch of people, a bunch of kids? How are you ever going to do that? You'd have to, make it harder to buy guns and sell guns and get guns and carry guns and ammunition too. And the NRA would never stand for it. So the politicians would never stand for it. So let's forget about controlling guns, okay? Or even ammunition, okay? Let's just concentrate on those corpses, okay? Just concentrate on the corpses.
Well, thank you, Rick, and thank you so very much for watching. Stay warm. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.